I went and bought you some nice bits of steel.
That's it.
80 bucks. And it didn't take long before he turned them into these. Doesn't Matt do beautiful work? Wow.
And we got this one here for the short one.
Okay.
So that's a bit longer.
Yep. So this is the second one.
This is the second one.
So you took my big block of steel that I bought from inCARn.
Yep.
And you made that.
So we'll replicate this bolt pattern today.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll put this on there. So we'll locate it nicely in there. We've got our room for our. It looks like if you look in there, you can sort of see the balls have really just worked.
Yeah, that area there.
In that area there. So like the cage obviously will come through. So that's just what we make clearance for, the cage. So
yeah, it's in case it's like that. Yeah.
So
that's beautiful. Take hours and hours to machine that.
Oh, there's a few hours each side.
Yep.
We'll do 2 holes, thread them, and once that's done, we'll weld them to the stubs. So then we'll put this on there. Weld, and then we can weld all around the inside. As well.
Then in the car.
Then put them in the car, and then these are done. Original Porsche shafts, and this should never fail. Like there's no failure point really.
No.
So now we've got our pilot hole. We'll step up to our 8.5mm drill. So then we can run our 10 by 1.25.
Right.
So we'll start this one. So we'll take our tap, we'll get an 8.5 in there. So I stick this in there.
What's the thread spacing on the tap? 1.5.
1.5.
1.5.
So I just nip that up, not too tight. This is it's not textbook the way I do it. I do it off as it's slowing down, I'll let it start and pull itself in. So I know it's dead 90 degrees to our work. I could start it by hand, but if I go a degree this way, where I know I drilled it, and this thing, like, you're not gonna.
Yeah, it's straight.
It's dead square, so I'll start it. I'll slow it down, and I'll start it down. And I'll sort of let it just fall. And because I've left this loose, I don't want to overpower it and snap the tap. But because I might just go a touch more with that. Give it a little tap. So you can see it started cutting.
Yep.
So now I'll back this off.
We have to remember this isn't aluminium we're drilling, this is 1020 steel.
Yeah. So that's square. I pull this up. My tap's still in there. You can see it's cut 3 threads. This is a spiral flute tap. So the chips come out towards me, and then I'll just give it a couple more turns, just so I know it's definitely started. Which, as you can see, it's cutting nicely. This is a brand new tap as well, so it's doing exactly what it should be. And now I'll back it off, and the chips should break off now. And then we take our tap out, and now we've only got 3 or 4 threads, but we know it's 90 degrees to the hole, and it's good. So then we can get our little bolt. You see this? So that's starting nicely. Now I'll finish that by hand.
Will you?
Yeah. Just because I don't want to snap it in there. And
pretty good steel.
Yeah.
It's not case hardened, but nonetheless it's pretty good quality steel. Now we have to introduce, wait for it, here it is, the MG's wiring loom in its entirety. And boy, did I struggle remembering where everything went. Not helped by the fact that half my little paper labels had fallen off. I should have used the plastic ones for everything.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
So the wiring loom, look at this mess, oh my goodness. I'm actually really pleased with the way this has worked out. I'm really surprised at how well stuff's fitting. That there are no major changes to the loom. We have to extend a few things, like here we have that's the throttle sensor, this is the brake switch, so they can't quite reach, so I have to extend them to get round there, and we've got to make up brackets and things around the pedals, but it's still a massive job, but I'm not losing sleep over it anymore. Bearing in mind, as I've said before, that the motor's now at the back that used to be at the front. Everything's changed position, and you wouldn't think the Loom would fit. Now, the Porsche is a much smaller car than the MG. The MG's Loom, it ran along and back and up and round, but when you just string it out like this, it more or less fits. And I know it looks a bit of a disaster, but I'm just trying to see if I can get things more or less in the right place. As you can see, we've got the dash, we've got the display, heating and ventilation, even though there's no HVAC in the car, I'll just leave that there. Stereo controls, drive selector, brakes, and start button, and instruments. But things are actually reaching. The cables are actually plugged in. This is the passive entry security module. We've got tyre pressure monitoring system. We don't need that, but why not leave it connected? Who knows, we might add that later. We've got the ABS brake module there, or part of it. These are the brake coils that operate in an ABS system. That's the communications control module, the ECU, the fuse box that was in the front of the car, and as you can see, that's still got everything in it, including the big fuses. We've got the interior fuse box. I'd say probably 70% of those fuses we don't need anymore, but we'll just leave everything where they are. The body control module, the gateway module, the yaw control module we are going to need. We don't need the crash sensor module, as we found. That's this one. We found that that's actually superfluous. The car will operate without it. It won't operate without the ABS module. So all those. Now this is all stuff that was in the back of the car, in the rear of the cabin. So rear speakers, rear hatch release, rear camera, the radar sensors in the panels at the very corners of the back of the car, hatch release, high mounted stoplight, all that kind of stuff. At the moment we don't need any of that. We'll just attach the earths where there are earths like that. We'll just make sure they go to the chassis like that one. They're all over the place. There's about 20 of them we have to connect. So I reckon if we just get all those earthed, and then we put a battery here, put 12 volts on it there to the chassis, I reckon there's a good chance we might actually light up the dash, and it'll start telling us on the display all the things that are still wrong with the car. And I have no doubt there will be plenty, but I find that's quite exciting. I've got a feeling we might have some success. What do I think of the likely hurdles? I think the first one is getting the car unlocked, because we haven't got any of the electronics in the door. There are sensors in the door and in the door handle and so on. So we might be that we push the key and nothing happens to notionally unlock the car. You'll also notice the main Porsche board that's still there, with very few relays left in it. I've left all the fuses in it, but only the relays we need for things like hazards, wipers, lights, headlights, brake lights, that kind of thing. That's about all that does. So the only thing these two Looms will share in common is the battery, the 12-volt battery. Won't that be fun? Coming soon. One thing I am not is a motor trimmer. I know we talked about colours last time. Thanks for your contributions on colours, but that's obviously of very low importance right now. Similarly, trimming it. At some point I'm going to take it to a motor trimmer and say, look, there it is. Can you make up something that resembles how the Porsche was originally? I've got all the original trim out of the Porsche, but I suspect not a lot of it's going to fit now. We will use the Porsche dash though. I've retained that because it's nice to have the dash and the binnacle. So as you look through the windscreen and glass, it actually looks like a Porsche. I suspect the whole centre section will need to be redone to incorporate all these MG style gauges, which actually I think they look pretty cool. So let's not even stress thinking about trimming it at this stage. Suffice to say, probably episode 87. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you'd remember that I've bid and lost out at a few auctions along the way. Yes, I did win the electric MG at a ridiculously cheap price, but it's always been on my mind about all the other cars that I'd like to see get the EV treatment after this one's finished. A Citroën DS Goddess would be great, just like my dad had. A beautiful silent car whose only failing is a boring, underpowered four-cylinder motor. That would be a fantastic EV. Also, that Citroën is the most popular review on our channel, and probably the funniest if I say so myself, so you might want to look at that. Another car is the Mark II Jag. That'd be a fabulous EV as well. One day. You remember I missed an old Jag at auction, and you remember a while ago I lost out on a written-off Tesla Model S. Some sort of tech glitch, my bid didn't go through, and it went to somebody else. Very annoying. Damn, that's annoying. Well, last Saturday another one popped up and I threw in a low online bid, less than last time. But I had to work at the racetrack all day and I wasn't paying attention when the auction closed. Well, guess what? I'm now the owner of a damaged, stat write-off Tesla Model S dual motor that can never be registered and driven on public roads again. Me, a Tesla owner. Leave a comment. Why did I buy it? Well, for my purposes, the Model S is a perfect project car. Unlike the recent Model 3 and Model Y, which do get crashed a lot more often, the 70D has not one but two powerful Tesla small drive units, eminently suited for EV conversions. They'll be the perfect fit in a Porsche 928, significantly more power and easier to fit than my little MG motor. You might remember Wayne, who's using one for his Honda S2000 conversion. Now, before you stress about my basket case 928, I'm way too far down the track already. It's full steam ahead with the MG hardware, so don't worry. What else? Oh yes, the Tesla has a big 70 kilowatt hour battery in 16 separate modules, like the MG's 18 smaller modules. They're very practical for repackaging into an EV. Now, the batteries in the later Model 3 and Model Y are very long and they just don't fit in projects like this. So once again, the Model S is the car to have. Best case scenario, I can sell everything in the car to finance future projects and or use the bits I need myself. Picking up a dual motor Tesla for under 10 grand could be fantastic. Or it could be a disaster. You know, whenever you get a bargain, more often than not, there's a reason why. At salvage auctions, it is a big gamble. This car is 1,000 kilometres away and you can't inspect it anyway. You can't find out anything except what you see in the photos. And I reckon this car, judging by the broken front suspension, the ding in the front bumper, the rim that's clearly been driven a long way without a tyre, and the fingerprint dust on all the touch points, has been nicked, joyriding, and smashed some speed bumps at warp speed, most probably while being chased by the cops. There's no key, the car is disabled, there's no history, there's no idea what the mileage is, the battery's flat, so it's probably blown the pyro fuse and disconnected the high voltage battery as well. So for all I know, the battery underneath could be wrecked or maybe even missing. These cars, without power, you can't even get them out of park. So it's going to be an adventure. Now, all of these questions will be answered when it arrives, in about 2 weeks. So why not subscribe and we'll find out together. But in the meantime, Matt's continuing with the drive shaft, so let's see how he's going. Why are you putting pressure on it?
Just holding it square so when I go and tack it, it doesn't,
Doesn't move.
Doesn't move, and because I'll put a fair bit of heat into it. That's
Perfect.
Pretty much nice. There's no hardening there, but on this one, down here where the bearings run, it's all hardened, and it was skipping in the lathe. And
I'm sorry you had to wreck 3 bits on your lathe.
yeah, just because it's interrupted and cuts, and it's super hard.
Just like soldering, except way hotter.
That's it.
So how would you rate your welds there?
Not the best, not the worst.
And Matt's being modest as usual. One thing's for sure, Matt's welding is way better than mine. Matt says he's not an engineer, but his seat-of-the-pants mechanical skills are really good, and it's a pleasure to watch him work. So all I have to do is reassemble, repack and install the CV joints. Now, I know from past experience decades ago, it can be tricky to get all the balls back in the cage, but being a Porsche item, this turns out to be really simple. And Matt's screw threads, of course, line up perfectly. But bearing in mind that we've now repositioned the motor slightly lower and closer to the centre of the car, fingers crossed that everything lines up nicely and fits. So how do your drive shafts look?
They're good.
I bolted them up for you.
Yeah.
Show us.
Spinny.
Not binding. You got
Got
play.
movement. They spin smooth. It is at an aggressive angle, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So your measurements were good.
Let's hope.
Measure twice, cut once.
And especially when you're dealing with
Well, yeah, you don't want
this,
to
we got to
redo
go
that.
buy. This we got to buy again. It's not
Yeah.
like we have 10 in stock.
Nah.
You can feel when a drive shaft's binding. It's like you
Yeah,
know, so it's
yeah.
full extension, but that feels like nice and smooth,
That's a nice job.
It's sort of a...
But when we drop it down on the ground...
Motor, I was thinking, oh, it's never going to grow, but...
Yes, it's... No, perfect.
So...
You've got a couple of mil there. Perfect. Well done, buddy.
Good.
Shake and bake, Ricky, Bobby.
Yeah, that's good. The motor's in now, we can fully weld the mounts. We can box the chassis in. We'll notch the gearbox. Weld the mounts and paint them because they won't have to... Like, it shouldn't have to come out again, I don't think, once we do that.
Next job, let's fit the high voltage hardware around the back of it.
Yep.
Right, so that's a major milestone achieved. Matt's got the motor in the right place and the drive shafts are in. There's just a little bit of float there. It's perfect. And on this side the same. Nice. And they're not hitting the springs. The car's down on the ground. I think we might be right. Now, just let's get an overview of what we've got. You can see I've put some coolant lines back on just to test to see where things might go. But let's talk about the high voltage stuff. Let's look at the charge door. Start at the beginning. Here is our charge port. In the MG it was oriented like this, but that won't work in this one. Let's just take this off. I can show you. Right, what we have got is AC and DC charging, which is great. I want to retain DC charging so we can do fast charging on the road. It'd be nice to fit it like that, but we can't because of the way these cables flow. You can see there's absolutely no room there, no room above. So we'll have to orient probably like that. Now that's a bit awkward because the plug, when it goes in, comes out like this. And that means the charge door can't be hinged in its normal way like that. We might have to turn it round like that. Looks a bit ugly. Or we'll simply refit the hinge on the other side. Or even hinge it on top like that. That'd be good. Because when it's plugged in, the port will be going like this. The purists are going to hate it, but the purists are going to hate this car anyway for lots of other reasons. So, there's our charge port. And where does it go? From here, we've got both AC. This is AC, 240 volts, and an earth. And DC, that comes to this mysterious looking box. What is this, you're wondering? It is nothing more than a power distribution box. DC comes in here, goes to the battery. Comes back from the battery to go to the motor. DC, where it's converted by the inverter to AC. So that's all this is. This is just a switch box with a little tamper switch here. So nothing happens if that's open. And 3 big fuses to fuse 400 volts going to the DC to DC converter. Takes 400 volts in, 12 volts out. It's an item that needs cooling. We'll come to that later. These ones go to the heater, the internal cabin heater. It uses a 400 volt element in the heater assembly. It also is used here to drive the air conditioning compressor. So this is all 400 volts. Danger, Will Robinson, do not touch. And we've got to fit in the engine bay somewhere, and I'm thinking it'll go down here somewhere or along there, or maybe off here. There's another major component, which is called, and I think it'll probably go in here somewhere. This is the charger. Now the charger probably will go something like that, maybe on the other side underneath that, to keep it nice and low. This is the thing that takes the 240 volts in and converts it back to 400 volts when you're charging from an AC power point. Now, there are 2 cooling circuits in this car, each with their own coolant tank and pump. And they'll be in here somewhere as well. The first circuit cools the motor, the inverter, and the charger. As you can see, there are cooling connections here, here, and here. And that's all on one big circuit. Now that uses the radiator. Now the radiator would normally be right next to the motor, right here. In fact, that's the top radiator hose connection right there. The bottom radiator connection is here. Interesting that it's a big diameter and then immediately goes small. It makes me think they've used the petrol car's radiator and just taped it down because it doesn't have the same cooling requirements. Nonetheless, we've got an issue because the motor is here and we'd expect to have the radiator way up here somewhere. I think it's the same as in the petrol car. Now, we can easily make this radiator fit. It's a little bit tall, but with a bit of adapting of these brackets here, that could go there, could go just down a bit. I don't want to scrape it on these lugs. Could go there. Fine, that's a great position for it. Leaves plenty of room for the battery there. We can use the existing radiator fan, which works, just the 12 volt connections there. That'll be fine, except that it's an awfully long way from these coolant connections here, all the way back through the tunnel to the pump and expansion tank, which is presumably has to be right back here somewhere. So we need to run these cooling hoses a long way from these tiny little pumps. Will they be up to the job? I have no idea. Do we need it to be that long? What's an alternate idea? We could get small aftermarket radiators and fit them here. I suspect the cooling requirements are not that onerous. I think we could probably do that. So just radiators here with a fan. Now the second cooling system is a cooling and heating system, and it is for the DC to DC converter. Now if you remember, oh, that's heavy. That goes in here, like that. Now that second cooling system is really interesting because it is just used for cooling the battery and, as I said, this DC to DC converter here. And the way it works is it doesn't use a radiator at all. It uses the heat exchanger part of the air conditioning system. Now we've got a bit of a problem there because I don't think we can use the MG's heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. It's a massive big box that goes right in the middle against a flat firewall, and as you can see, the Porsche has a huge big hump for the torque tube coming back. So it just doesn't fit, and it can't be easily disassembled. So I hate to say it, we might have to do without the MG's factory air conditioning system. Now that poses a little problem because the battery does not use the radiator to keep it cool, it uses the air conditioning. So we've got to come up with an alternate plan, maybe a second radiator, to make sure our battery stays within temp. It's critical that we keep the high voltage battery at the right sort of temp. How the MG's electronics understand that and work with that when there's no factory air conditioning system in the car, I don't know. We'll find out. So that's my little overview of where we're at. Hope you enjoyed it today. See you next time.